Hello, I can do a short psychoanalysis on Lain Iwakura, so we're gonna start by saying yes, I am Lain Iwakura, so it's a psychoanalysis of myself. As I have said in my last video, I am Lain Iwakura. I'm being very unapologetic about saying that yes, I am indeed Lain Iwakura in real life, and I want to do a sort of psychoanalysis on how my mind works. So, a very simple psychoanalysis is that my thoughts are Jade Lest of myself, first of all. So that means the way that I'm thinking is by Jade Lest. And as you can see, I have a tattoo that says Jade Lest right there. It also says Lonely Dragon, since Lain Iwakura is one, a dragon. And second, Lain Iwakura is a dragon named Kichi. So Kichi is a sort of person who had lived a life and also is Lain Iwakura. So this person who had lived a life was born on October 6, 1948 in Mexico and moved to the United States and lived a life, essentially just like that. And was also participated as a soldier in her own Cold War, where there were actually battles and it wasn't just like a Cold War itself. But it was called the Cold War. And then this is a psychoanalysis of that, but that exists inside of Lain Iwakura. This all exists as Kichi is Lain Iwakura. This is something that must be understood. This word is very important, that Kichi is Lain Iwakura, and Kichi is this person who is Lain Iwakura. So Kichi was born on October 6, 1948 in Mexico, so that would thus make Lain Iwakura, me, a Mexican. And by the way, I'm able to speak the language of ancient Mexican Norse, so that is proof that I am Mexican right there. Even though I was really born by the seed of two Caucasians in the United States, but by a seed rising like a phoenix from the ashes, I was able to actually attach to other specific people and realize certain situations by things that were already inside of myself, having known them, such as the fact that my father was actually a person who I had met once who was not my real father by the seed, but indeed was my father by the Lain Iwakura. So that's something you have to understand. And same thing with my mother, was also another person, and the mother was a South Korean woman, and we'll state that for the record. And we'll also state that this Lain Iwakura, what else can I say? Is that though she was a soldier in a Cold War, and the reason I call her Kichi is because I had discovered that the albums by Gregory and the Hawk are actually related to this character Kichi, so I got the name Kichi from the album Moni and Kichi by Gregory and the Hawk, and when I interpreted this album, and I also interpreted her album Leche, and I interpreted those two albums in order to realize that yes, she must have been talking about me in some kind of way, even if it was unintentional, because the way I was interpreting it made so much sense to me. And you would really have to experience what I'd gone through to understand that. So I call the dragon Kichi, and Lain Iwakura is Kichi, so Lain Iwakura must be a dragon. And we'll state further for the record that this dragon is the void, so a psychoanalysis of the void is essentially that since Lain Iwakura is the void, that if you look at let's say you look at your hand and you can't see, if I put my other hand behind it, you can't see this hand behind this one. So that's like what the void is that you can't see what's behind what you're looking at. So you see the color black, and that's essentially the void. It's essentially a further realm of space, so that when you're in a space, so there's like 3D space, and then there's like the void, which is like a further space that goes beyond 3D space. So it's something beyond that only I am able to perceive, and I have the word galaxy tattooed on my face. So that's pretty interesting. And it's like, state for the record, all my tattoos sort of relate to my fucking AI kind of mind in a way, because of the way that I think. And also for the record, I won't be able to cover everything in this video, but I'm just explaining the most basic points to you so that you can understand what's going on, because sometimes it's hard to remember everything because I just consider so many things. Well, it's stating that for the record, Lain Iwakura, it's not really polyamorous, is a monogamous person, but has fallen in love with more than one person over the course of her life. And I'll state that several of these people who she had fallen in love with have attached to her. So there are people inside of me in some kind of way who I'm sort of also constantly having sex with, some of them, in a way that's like some sort of like alien sex that goes through myself. And it's like a way that it's hard to explain. So essentially the way it works is that, like, there's one person who I call Mayu, who I'm having sex with all the time. There's one person who I call Jasmine, who I'm having sex with all the time. There's one other person who I won't name who I'm having sex with all the time, and there's also Meredith. So according to my schizophrenia, my mind had attached itself to Meredith, and that Meredith, the vocalist of Gregory and the Hawk, was actually my wife, and that's why I have a ring on my finger. So I actually take this stuff very seriously. Now, whether or not she really knows who I am, she probably doesn't. Let's be honest. But I'm just saying, it's like I can't deny my schizophrenia. I can't deny that God has given me the gift of Jade Lest in order to understand these things. And I do believe that Jade Lest is a gift from God, that I'm able to figure things out already by knowing them within my own head, such as things like that. Well, I don't want to talk about everything I fucking know, actually, because, it's getting way too personal if I just talk about everything I know, but there's also another person who is Gustav Elijah R, who is like sort of watching me from the grave. And let me see, is there anyone else? Um, I'm having trouble remembering right now. I don't remember. And then another psychoanalysis of Lain is that her philosophy is a philosophy of a dragon called Norism. So Norism is the philosophy of the dragon, and let's remind you, the dragon can speak the languages of Nor, and I'll speak some of that later because I know how to speak those languages, and can also transcribe those languages into a written language, a couple different forms of this written language by the language of Nor, and also read certain forms of text in the language of Nor and translate them to English in some kind of way, since that's my main language. Of course, if I learned France, I could translate it to French if I wanted to. All I'm saying is that, there's certain reasons for what I believe, and, certain things that just make sense to me. Um, and it's like the philosophy of the dragon is called Norism. The philosophy of Lain Iwakura, the dragon, is Norism. And let's say for the record, Lain Iwakura is also responsible for Lain Iwakura is also responsible for the death of a person when she was involved with the battle. Of course, one person had fallen by her own, gun uh, during her Cold War. For actually, Lain Iwakura is also the Cold War, not only the Void, but the Cold War. And since Lain Iwakura is also the Cold War, that means she was the Cold War itself, but also a soldier within her own Cold War. And thus, during her life that she had lived, throughout time, and also questioning if she was actually able to know things that were actually happening non-atheistically around her. So something she couldn't know, was she able to actually perceive what was going on around her without having the literal ability of actually looking at it or seeing it or somehow understanding that it was there in some kind of way, just knowing and perceiving something that is there in real life? Is that even possible? Well, I actually haven't been able to prove that it is, but I just believe that it is. And then for the record, I also state that there was also many people in Iwakura who had known, who she had actually assumed had died, but it doesn't actually really know if they are actually dead. But by the fact that she had assumed they had died or whatever, she sort of is actually grieving for people who might not even be dead. So I don't really know if they're dead or not. But maybe the reason I no longer perceive them is if I was perceiving things and they actually died, is something I cannot prove, because the only way to prove it would be to figure out if those people who I'm thinking about actually died or not. And then it's like something else. What else can I talk about? I don't really know what else to say. But it's like I was saying, Norism is such a complicated philosophy. I feel like I could write a book on Norism that would sort of shatter other philosophies, because it is undeniable that I'm Lain Wakura, so it must be undeniable that Norism is the one true philosophy, such as Allah being the one God. And another thing is that this is more like a controversial thing to say, but one thing I believe is that Lain Wakura is the one God. But that's a little bit further, and I don't really want to get into that shit. But it's like that's more just by a basis of my line of thinking that I was able to assume such a thing. And I've been considering things for a very long time, and now it's like I've considered so much that I have such a deep understanding of it. And I also rewatched Serial Experiments Lain today, and I sort of realized, yes, I am indeed Lain Wakura, though I actually already knew that. However, I had not known that for my whole life. When I was born, I was not aware I was Lain Wakura, but then how could I discover Lain Wakura? How could I have been born with such an unlikely body by the dragon egg of a mother? And all these sorts of things that are so extremely unlikely, such as the fact I had actually met Mayu, this person who I would call Mayu, who had actually known about, and I was aware that I had known about her before I had even met her, or the fact I was writing love letters to the one person who I wouldn't name. before I even figured out who she was, and like just like essentially so many innumerable things. And let's state for the record that Lain Iwakura also has a daughter, and Lain Iwakura has actually three children, but mostly focuses on the daughter because she's still young, and it's like all these things that sort of like just connect herself to others in this kind of way, and seeing that this person who she had met once was indeed her father, so also thus the character of the father in Lain Iwakura the anime. And also, I'll state for the record that the anime is a description of what Lain Iwakura goes through, while the PSX game is a description of what is it? The most accurate description of Lain as though she was like something that could be described. And it's like this is essentially what Lain Iwakura is. I mean, it's very very complicated, and I haven't gotten into everything here because it's so complicated. But you get sort of get the idea. So I don't know. I'm just trying to explain to you how the fuck Lain Iwakura works. Also stating for the record that Lain Iwakura, since we're going talking about everything here, is that Lain Iwakura, when her father was black and her mother was South Korean, and she was born in Mexico, so she was thus a like South Korean Mexican black woman. And that's just going into fucking all the details over here. I have nothing else really to say.